My name is Helen. I'm from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, I'll be kicking off this morning's session. First of all, before we jump into it, we would just like to wish Murray Hofmeyer a very, very, very happy birthday from everyone in the sector. Murray, I like to imagine that this is exactly what you are doing throughout the whole of lockdown entirely, and that the wooden paneled room that we see you in on meetings is just a big ruse, and actually this is where you've been the entire time. Murray, on a serious note, thank you for everything that you have done in the sector, and we hope that you have a fantastic lockdown birthday, and all the best for the year ahead.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Where do you get that picture? That's wonderful. Thanks,
I
Helen.
just get these strange WhatsApp messages with photographs of you, Murray. You know, it's a daily occurrence, but I thought I would share today's one. But yeah, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, that was in the Richtersveld in 2016. Yeah, so thanks, Helen, and to the community. That's very special. I really appreciate that. And this is a very important community for me. I really feel at home and amongst friends. So great way to celebrate. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Murray. Fantastic. So yeah, back to the business of this morning, which is our focus on supporting students virtually. We know that supporting student success is very important to everyone in this community, and with us being thrown into lockdown, doing that on a virtual scale is now more important than ever. So we're really excited to take you through today's session. This is hosted by the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, as well as the University of Pretoria. So we're very happy to have one of our university partners on board to share their insights. So the structure for today's session is we will be doing just starting off with some housekeeping and overview of the format of today's session. So just on the housekeeping side, Julian will now move to put everybody on mute, and then I will, and the fellow speakers will just unmute ourselves. Julian, do you want to? Fantastic. So if you're not speaking this morning, we do just ask that you you do keep yourself on mute, just so that we can manage the sound. Also, if you're not speaking, perhaps you would like to put your video off, just to save bandwidth for everybody. Yeah, just to make sure that we're maintaining as strong a connection as possible. We do have the chat functionality in Zoom. So if you head over to the chat box, you can ask questions throughout today's presentation. We really do encourage you to ask questions. This is designed as an informal session. So yes, very much looking forward to having your questions. And we have some dedicated time for Q&A in this plenary session. So very much looking forward to covering as many of those as possible. Okay, then let's just get the slides going again. Great. So looking to the overview of this morning's session, you'll be seeing that we're doing a deep dive on supporting students virtually, and we'll be looking at two approaches from ourselves at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and then also from the University of Pretoria. And then we'll be having a 10-minute slot where we'll be putting your questions to the panel. We'll then be moving into the breakaway groups, as we've done in the last couple of events. Online events with the forum. So this will be a 45-minute session where we're aiming to have groups of around 6 to 8 people, where you can really kind of dive deeper on the ideas that we've shared this morning. We will then be coming back together as a group, and we will be sharing insights from 3 or 4 groups. So we're hoping to have some volunteers to share their experiences. And then we'll be closing out and highlighting a couple of next steps. So let's get into it. So, you know, when we sat back and thought about what are some of the ideas that we can share with you from our experience, of supporting students virtually. At the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, we've actually been supporting students virtually for a number of years. First of all, with our Dell Scholars Program in the US, which is an entirely virtual support program, which has celebrated over 2,000 graduates and supports students across the US and across colleges in all the states. And so we've really kind of learned the backbone of supporting students virtually through that work. And when we started our Dell Young Leaders program here in South Africa about over 10 years ago, we have very much leveraged the experience of our sister program. In 2016, the foundation took a step further in developing student support online and virtually, and we launched our Sikelelo Scholars Program at the University of Pretoria. And this program was working on the assumption of, we know that personalized support is important, but how can we do that at a more scalable model? And so the University of Pretoria partnered with us to develop our Sikelelo Scholars. And this is a guided pathway model that very much leverages technology. The students actually don't ever meet with the program team in person. So yeah, we felt like, you know, being able to share some experiences and insights on this topic was something where we could add value. So the 4 pillars of virtual support that we would like to put to you all this morning from our experience are as follows. So the first is consider the essential tools for success. So we know right now that students, particularly students from low-income backgrounds that the majority of our programs will be supporting, have returned to households that are entirely inconducive to online learning. And so it's thinking about, we can't assume that everybody has access and has an equal access. And so solving for those essentials up front is something that we can't forget about. So solving for internet, electricity, device access. So how are you building this access to these tools as a central part of your support model before you think about anything else? Then the second is putting data to work. So at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, we really do believe that measurement matters. And so we've taken that ethos and we've driven it and designed it into our program work. So we're thinking about, how do you really understand the circumstances of individuals? How do you track progress? And how do you drive efficiency in your teams through leveraging data? And all of this to do, and all of this is to help your teams and you know, those of you who are practitioners, is to focus on what you do best, which is offering personalized support and building those relationships with students. So how can we really leverage that data to help us drive efficiency and drive workflows? The third pillar that we would like to put to everyone is, how are you engaging in two-way conversations? So how is this about, you know, first of all, really understanding needs of students up front, but also about how do you continually intentionally create reminders and create ways of reminding the student that you are there and supporting them, but also nudging them towards the right behaviors. So how are you engaging in communications? How are you setting up your programs to enable that communication flow? And also with this two-way conversation, you know, right now, community is difficult, and we always assume community to be very much around our in-person events and being on campus together. But are there other solutions to creating virtual community and possibly reduce feelings of isolation that many of our students are experiencing right now? And at the center of this design of these communications is how you're putting the student first, how you're driving their accessibility and really start and using this two-way conversation to understand their needs. The final pillar that we would like to highlight as part of a virtual support model is knowing that non-academic factors are more important now than ever. So we can't just focus on students' grades. We can't just look at the academic success as a you know, as a bucket by itself. We do need to really understand those impacting factors. Right now, students are in environments where they can't turn off their connection to their personal circumstances. So seeing your family starving is something that is going to distract your students from their academic success, no matter what academic intervention you put in place. So how are you putting your personalized advising and resources into action to be able to support those broader needs? And also showing the student that you understand that and that you are prioritizing their overall well-being. At the start of the lockdown, the foundation set 3 goals for our supporting our work, which was to ensure student wellness, to ensure that students would have access to online learning, and that we would be able to maintain communication with students. So we're basing those priorities around these pillars, and we're very excited to take you through these pillars today. We wanted to paint a real picture of these pillars for you and be able to put some case studies and some examples to these to bring them to life for you before you start thinking about them in your own work and how you could leverage them in your own environments and to support your own students. So we've put together a panel for you this morning, where we're going to take a deeper dive on these. So first of all, Dr. Khadi Matsabate is joining us from the University of Pretoria. Dr. Khadi is the Deputy Director of Academic Development in the Department of Education Innovation, who joined the team recently in 2020, following a role as the Head of Community-Based Research and Postgraduate Studies at the university's Mamelodi campus. Then we have Sihle. Sihle joins us also from the University of Pretoria, but she's directly working on the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation's Sikelela Scholars Program, and she drives our student support and interventions on the program. Sihle joined the foundation in 2019, and this follows roles working in research and monitoring and evaluation on large-scale student support projects and other programs in education. Our host for today's chat is going to be Kadleho Tindisa. Kadleho is the program manager for the Dal Young Leaders program and the Sikelela Scholars program at the University of Pretoria, and he carries out this work on behalf of the foundation. Kadleho joined the programs also in 2019, and he joined that following significant project management experience in higher education, where he was working to drive education developments and solutions to projects. He was also, in his role, he also had an oversight role as head financial officer. Myself, I'm Helen. I manage the foundation's investment in university success in South Africa. And I focus on meeting our goals of driving graduation outcomes and also helping our students to launch meaningful careers and become leaders in their professions. I actually joined the foundation in 2015, and prior to that was working in the UK and the United Arab Emirates on programs supporting young people to maximize their potential across higher education, corporate recruitment, and in government-led projects. So with that, I am going to hand over to Kadleho, who will take us into our panel. And bearing in mind that it is a very cold morning in Cape Town, and we have storms on the way, we've pitched this as a fireside chat this morning. So I'll welcome Sihle, Dr. Khadi, and hand over to Kadleho.
Thank you so much, Helen. And as you've mentioned, it is quite cold in Cape Town. And it's not as cold as what it is in Cape Town, but it is a bit chilly with the cold front coming. So yeah, a warm welcome to everyone that has joined us today. And to our panel, thank you very much, particularly Dr. Khadi, who's been very instrumental to the support work that has been done during this period at the University of Pretoria. So yeah, it is a fireside chat that we're gonna have. So please relax, be comfortable, imagine yourself sitting with us, and we're about to and just dive deeper into what has been happening. And what is interesting about today's session is everything that's going to be shared by the panel has happened, and it's real, and it's what the students have experienced. as the team has actually experienced through this particular period. So like I said, relax and let us enjoy this particular session. Without taking more time, I'm actually going to get into our first question, which is around the first pillar of student support. And it is our first pillar of student support is to consider the essential tools for success. So to you, Helen, how has the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation approached ensuring this?
Yeah, thanks, Kadleka. So I think, at the beginning of the lockdown, we had to make some really hard decisions around to what extent will we support students, and what would our immediate response be. And we had to build that on, build the airplane in the sky. There wasn't a lot of time. So we quickly repurposed funding. So we looked at the potential cost savings that we would be able to create across the year. And we reprioritized funds to be able to unlock stipends for our students across the Dal Young Leaders and Sikelelo Scholars program. So we've since the start of the lockdown, we've given students a monthly stipend, which is effectively, we're trying to solve for internet access, electricity, and we knew that we didn't want to necessarily have to understand, we wanted it to be a fair system. We didn't want to have, dropping a little bit of money to a student who needed electricity, a little bit of money to a student who needed internet. So what we decided was we would put the trust in the student's hand, that they would use the money for what they really needed. The fantastic thing about this money is it's also gone a long way to helping the students put food on the table. So, we're solving for wellness in that the students and their families have got sufficient food security. Bearing in mind that many of our students' homes have been impacted due to job losses from the lockdown. And then we know students actually say they're learning the Dal Young Leaders or the Sikelelo Scholars way because they've got improved internet accessibility from the data they're able to purchase through the stipend. And students also buying airtime and that sort of thing to be able to make calls and WhatsApp messages and stay in touch with study groups, etc. So that's how we decided to solve for creating those essential tools for success.
Thank you so much, Helen. Very interesting in terms of how comprehensive it's been, particularly when you consider the context of South Africa and all the challenges faced by students, and with job losses and the normal social issues that are there. It was well thought of in terms of it being comprehensive. Dr. Khadi, over 35,000 undergraduate students at the University of Pretoria. How did the University of Pretoria work to understand if students had the essential tools in place?
Thanks, Katlego, and thanks so much for this opportunity. So for us, we resorted to our in-house learning management system, which is Blackboard, and I believe other universities are using other types of learning management systems. And this became very useful in that after we reopened for online learning, we then went into the learning management system, which has a tracking feature, and we could identify students who had not logged on or participated actively into our ClickUp, what we call a ClickUp system. And in that way, we were able to identify those who were not participating in our offerings. And that's how we identified these students. And the system is so good that it also gave us an idea of were they accessing through a smartphone or were they accessing through a laptop, and those who had not been accessing at all. So for us, that became very key, and about 353 students were identified using that tracking system.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khadi. I think it ties in with the second pillar, which speaks to data and putting it to work. So, CK, could you tell us more about how you've leveraged data to offer personalized support to students virtually?
Thank you so much for that question, Katleho. So what we've done really well in collaboration with the Susan Dell Foundation is that we have access to all of our students, right? So with each student, we have a profile of them that we can see. And so at the start of the lockdown, every student was sent a survey, right, to ask, what are the current circumstances that you're in, right? Are you able to go home? What are your major concerns at the moment? And so for each student on our programs, we knew exactly what their key concerns were. So some students were afraid of going home. Some students were concerned around like health issues. Some students were afraid of online learning in general. And so for each student, we were able to tag them in terms of what their particular issue is. And then we're trying to resolve for that particular student and the concern that they were facing at the time. And so I think using that information that we sourced from the students right from the start, at the height of their anxieties, to be able to then remedy, to see what functions can we then use in collaboration with the university to be able to make sure that the student gets the support that they need, right? And so it varied in terms of maybe a student saying, well, now that I'm at home, I don't know how to manage my time. And so for that student who's tagged as having an issue around time management, we would send that student a fully developed template to say, well, this is how you can think about organizing your day, given all of the circumstances around your particular home situation. Look at this template, try and see how it works for you. And then a week later, we would contact the student to check how their time management system is going. And so I think using that survey information to understand very intimately what that student's concern is, and then resolving for that individual student, even though it's a system level, and then ensuring that that particular issue is resolved, is basically how we have been using the data to actually provide direct student support.
Thank you for that, CK. I think it goes without saying that data is very important, and we do know that it's a very valuable resource to have in this day and age. But what is very interesting is how you've actually taken the data and used it to actually support the students. Still on data, Helen, from a program operations level, how is the foundation invested in data collection and insights?
Yeah, Kat, sorry, Kat, you just cut out at the last second there for me. Can you just repeat your question?
Not a problem. So it was still very much around data, and I was asking that from a program operations level, how is the foundation invested in data collection and insights?
Great, yeah, thank you so much. So I think at a program's operation level, I think it's about how you put the right technology in place. So at the foundation, we have invested quite heavily in our technology tool. But I think, you know, there are ways that you can also set up tracking through Excel or Smartsheets if you don't have the full bouquet of technology available to you. I think the first thing is about understanding at operations level, what data do you want to track? So it's about understanding what are your drivers of risk. So for us, our main drivers of risk at the start of the lockdown were about how, you know, what are the barriers to students returning home. We had a 72-hour notice period to get students home. And so, you know, we really needed to be able to understand, well, what were they? So the survey that Sihle mentioned was very much focused on you know, are you experiencing anxiety? Are you experiencing, do you need travel advice support? Do you have a health related concern? And so I think being able to then understand how that drives risk and use that data to understand the risk in your group of students is then helps you to decide where do you direct your effort. So the first point is around, if you can understand that risk, then you can measure it. So for us, you know, that's how we've set up our data collection. How we practically do it in business as usual is that we actually run a check-in survey with our students at the start of each semester. And we have certain questions that would help us drive down to those risk factors. So understanding if the student has dropped any modules, have they added any time to their degree? Have they experienced a personal challenge at home? that would be raising their wellness concerns or mental health concerns. So really we look to understand that. So that check-in model has been extremely important to us throughout our 10 years of experience. In COVID, we had to respond quickly, and so that's where we actually moved to SurveyMonkey, because it wasn't built into the questions that we needed. The definition of risk had changed, so we needed to change the way that we collected data to be able to support that. I think the important thing though for teams to remember is we had to put that data back into our centralized administration tools, and so we spent a lot of time setting up tasks for the team based on what we'd heard from students. So from an operations perspective, what I would advise teams to think about is how are you managing student tasks, and how are you being able to understand what needs to be done where, and being able to assign work to your relevant team members. Through that, we were actually able to communicate with our leadership team the exact amount of effort that our team was putting in and how we were reducing risk on the program. So I'm able to go to our leadership team, which I did on Tuesday morning, and be able to say, on Dell Young Leaders, we've actually only seen an 8% overall risk due to COVID-19 in our students, through them either dropping modules or increasing their graduation time to graduation. So I think once you have the right operations in place to track the right risks, then you can communicate those risks and really be able to tell the story of your efforts and how you're moving your students into a safer place.
Thank you for that, Helen. I think what is very interesting is how, as a foundation, we managed to adapt, as and when the changes came, in ensuring that, the support is actually provided to students based on their needs. Please keep the questions coming in. There is a question which Monique has actually brought into place. We will have the Q&A session at the end, but it actually ties in with the next question that I have for Dr. Khadi. Dr. Khadi, how has the University of Pretoria worked innovatively to leverage data and technology to deliver student support during the period of online learning? So if perhaps some examples, if you can give some examples to how you've done that, it would be very much key as well to the question that has been posed.
Thanks, Katlego. So basically, after we identified these students who were not managing to participate in the online learning, we then engaged in a multi-stakeholder approach where we worked with faculties, with our faculty student advisors, pulling on all these resources at our disposal. But the first step that we did is I worked very closely with the manager of faculty student advisors. So at UP, each faculty has a dedicated faculty student advisor. And what we did is the list that we pulled out of our learning management system of students who were not accessing, who were seen to not be active on our learning management system, we distributed this list amongst our faculty student advisors. And then we made actual phone calls. But before that, we developed a phone call protocol of key questions to ask the students to establish their context and the challenges that they were facing. And it was very interesting because through the phone calls, we were able to identify, for instance, that 30 students were identified who already said they only needed hard copy study material, they would be okay. There were some, through the phone calls, we were able to establish their reason for not being active, probably because they felt overwhelmed, they still needed time. But, that became very key, because then it didn't mean that the non-participation was because they didn't have the resources. Some of them just still needed time to adjust because of the conditions that they were in. But ultimately, we identified about 52 students across six faculties who needed additional support. And we had to think of a very creative way of reaching out to these students, since we could not reach them through the normal online learning, having them participate in our virtual classrooms. So with the help of our deputy principal, we came up with the idea of telephone tutoring. Now, we had to look, as academics, you always look to the literature in terms of, has this been effective? Where has this been used before? And I came across an article where it has been used in Open University and International University, but this was in groups. But then because the numbers were so small, it afforded us the opportunity to do individual tutoring over the telephone. So we just, we dived into this approach, and what it entailed is that we then had to work with the faculties to identify tutors who would be available to offer this kind of support. It was very important that it had to be tutors who were already involved in the module, because we were working within a very short space of time. And we had funding from our COVID fund, which we used towards sponsoring the tutors, gave them money for airtime. We had to quickly develop this database of these students who needed support. We sent out, Google forms, just surveys to identify whether the student just needed the hard copy learning material, or whether they needed a combination of hard copy learning material and telephone tutoring. So once that was in place, we then had a short training session with the telephone tutors. And, for me, what became very important to mention to the tutors was to first make them aware of the kind of student that they're going to support, what to expect. So we had an online training where we first explained to them the profile of the type of student, because they had to prepare themselves in terms of being patient, in terms of coming across students who would be resistant at first, or students who were eager, but lived in areas where there's probably no electricity, the phone was not charged. So we tried to anticipate as much as possible and paint that picture for our telephone tutors before they went in and made the phone calls. So having done that, we did some administrative, but it was very important that the tutors, we kept in touch with them. And yes, so each tutor was then given a list of students they would then support over the phone. And they did that, and halfway through, we also sent out a survey again to both the student on the receiving end and the tutor to kind of gauge the challenges that they were coming across. And because we put a lot of thought into this in terms of what we anticipated the challenges, it came at no surprise that most of the challenges were sometimes the tutor would call a student and the student said, I haven't charged my phone, or there's noise background, or there's, there are riots where I live, there's no electricity. So they, for me, it was so surprising how the tutors then became very proactive and creative in terms of how they then, had to just think on their feet. I mean, I have examples of where tutors then, we provided them airtime, but some went to an extent of sharing material over WhatsApp for the students who had smartphones. So, and for me, it became very important because then they also took it upon themselves to also inform the lecturers of those modules when the student could not make it for a scheduled, online assessment. And we had to all think about how do we accommodate the student eventually. So yes, so we went the telephone tutoring route, and we also combined that with sending via courier hard copy learning material to try and reach out to these students.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khadi. I think it's very interesting to see how no student has actually been left behind. I mean, given the number of students that had to be supported, there's been tailored support to ensure that each and every student is covered, regardless of their challenges. So I do have to commend the university in terms of how they've approached this. and, you know, having the necessary capacity to support all students. And like I said, making sure that the support is very much tailored.
Yeah. And can I maybe just add the, sorry,
Not a problem, Dr. Mary.
I don't mean to paint a perfect picture. If we say no student was left behind, for me, I think this exposed also some of the holes in our systems, because you found that the cell phones that we had on the system for these students, some of the students we simply could not reach because the cell phones were not current. So those are the things that I think just was a wake-up call as well to us, that, you know, universities have to put systems in place where we revisit the data that we have and make sure that it's current. It's so that in cases like this, we know what we have, the data that we have of a student will enable us to reach out to that student.
Once again, I think it goes to show how important data is, and you know, that at all times, as an organization or institution, you've got the most updated data so that you're able to actually, you know, provide the support that is you require timelessly. Sitla, our third pillar talks to engaging in two-way conversations with students and nudging students to take action. Could you talk to how you've done this by leveraging the virtual support on offer at the University of Pretoria?
Thanks for that question, Gatleho. I think part of what we understand about student support is that when we're supporting students, we're supporting real people, right? And so I think when we speak about it as being engaging in a two-way conversation, it's really about garnering an actual human being into action so that they can reach their specific goals academically, but also enabling the programs that we are working on to be able to achieve those goals, which are around reducing student risk, right? And so I think one of the things that we were deeply aware of at the start of this lockdown is that students would experience serious mental health related kinds of issues. One, because for some students coming to university is an escape. And so going back home becomes this particularly difficult circumstance. Or just thinking about it, the fact that it is a pandemic, and I think for anybody, just as a human being, that can just cause a kind of anxiety. And so what are some of the ways in which we could almost provide support to our students and nudge them towards behavior that would really allow them to be able to protect their space, create routine, and then be able to engage in their work effectively? And I think one of the things that we've done really well from the start of the lockdown was then to think about what is our wellness support model for our students, right? And so then we had a 10-week wellness challenge series that then we created for our students, which we would send out weekly and then engage them via WhatsApp and via Instagram as well. So creating this kind of community. And then what we do is that we'd send a message at the start of the week to say, hey, have you checked the wellness challenge for this particular week? What have you done around your sleeping patterns? What have you done around your giving to somebody else in the community, as opposed to just thinking about this as an entirely difficult thing that you can't get out of? How are you managing your anxiety? And so I think this two-way conversation didn't necessarily always have to be this one-on-one phone call, because you don't always have the capacity to do that. But by sending these pictures of the entire group, so if one person has done one of the wellness challenges and they send back a picture of themselves and we share it with the rest of the group, that's building a kind of virtual support, but it's also creating a conversation within the group, right? To see, oh, wait a minute, other people are also engaging in this way. Other students are protecting themselves in this way, and they're being active, or they're running, or they're sleeping, or they're skipping. Whatever ways in which we could create a kind of conversation within the program, we saw that as a way of creating engagement, not only amongst ourselves and the students, but creating these peer-to-peer conversations through pictures, through videos. And I think that was a really important step that we needed to take to reduce students' feelings of isolation, but also having the students see that we put them first in thinking not just about their academic success, but also their overall well-being. Yeah, so I think in that response, I just wanted to open up our idea of what it means to be having a two-way conversation, that it's not only just the program and the student, but actually increasing peer-to-peer engagement through understanding how other students are living through this experience helps in creating that virtual community and conversation.
Thank you so much, Sitla. You've touched on the very critical aspect of student support being well-being. So we tend to overlook, student wellness, and it's got a very critical importance when it comes to how students perform academically. So very interesting how you've actually dealt with that. Still on that very same note, Helen, over 740 students supported by the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. How did the foundation approach solving for this pillar of ensuring you engaged in two-way conversations with students?
Yes, I think there's two things I'd like to talk to here. So I think the first is around how we've set up our programs, and particularly the Sikalala Scholars Program. So just to paint a picture for everybody, Sihle, as our lead on student-facing support, she is responsible for 334 students at the University of Pretoria, just her. You know, kind of when we think about student to staff ratios, we're working at over 300 students to one staff member. And that is a pretty incredible number. And a lot of you probably sit there like, oh my goodness, how is Sihle alive today? But I think the really important point is around how are we leveraging what's done in the system, and we're not duplicating efforts. We've heard from Dr. Khadi around the amazing work that was being done around telephonic tutoring and academic support. And as a program, how we felt we could be most helpful to students was to provide them with a guided pathway to that support. Instead of us reinventing the wheel and coming up with our own tutoring program, for example, if we knew that the university was able to provide it, then the best use of our resources as a foundation and spending foundation money was to really just help the student understand that that support was there. Because often, you know, students just, they don't, you know, either feel empowered or they're not aware that the support is available to access it. So I think that's the first thing I would say is how are you really understanding what your universities that you work with, what is their offering, what can you tap into that will create efficiency for your team, and your role just becomes the coordinator role. The other way that we've been able to engage in two-way conversations, the other thing I would mention on this is, you know, at the start of the lockdown, I mentioned that one of our priorities was to ensure that all students, we were able to maintain communications with all students. Now, we'd previously been reliant on email communication to deal with students. And just, you know, from a rands and cents point of view, it would cost 250 Rand a month for students, you know, to have 2 gigs of data, which I don't even know would last a month, probably not. Whereas for 17 Rand a month, or 17 to 35 Rand a month, they could buy a WhatsApp data bundle. And so when we thought about where we wanted, you know, we were giving students the stipends, but we didn't want all of it to go onto data to maintain communications with us. So we made the decision to invest in integrating WhatsApp, our technology tools. It was a 5-week project. We are lucky at the foundation that we have a technology team to support our work. We went through the routes of creating a WhatsApp API. So it's WhatsApp for Business API that you're able to build into a tool. And so we were able to solve for the communication in 2 ways through WhatsApp. The first was that I told you about our check-in surveys. We actually converted those to WhatsApp check-in surveys. So through the WhatsApp technology, students can reply yes or no to a set of questions. You can set criteria for the questions, like they can either say yes or no, and then you screen for those responses. Or you can have them answer like similar to your DSTV self-help checkout, you know, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. That's the first way that we changed our check-in process to go onto WhatsApp. The second thing that we did was we've built WhatsApp communications through one-to-one chat functionality. We are currently building out, and we're due to finish this week, the bulk WhatsApp messaging as well. So we can message a student one-on-one, or we can send bulk communications. And I think, you know, just being able to get to where the student is speak to them on technology that they can access. For the most part, 99% of our students had access to WhatsApp, and we converted to SMS where they didn't have WhatsApp. But I think really it's been really helpful. The interesting thing about the WhatsApp conversation is that you have to, WhatsApp controls spam marketing. So the student has to reply to a standardized opening messenger that is approved by WhatsApp, the technology company. So we actually set our opener as, "Hi, Dal Young Leader," or "Hi, Sikalela Scholar. This is your program team. How are you doing?" And just that, "How are you doing?" It's funny, we didn't think about it when we designed it as an opening. We just literally needed something that they would write back so we could send our actual message, because the message can only go through once they've replied to the standard opener. But we actually get so much data through that "How are you?" I saw one yesterday coming through, like, "I'm struggling to wake up in the morning." And just through that "How are you?" message, I think that's also how we're driving that nudge to reinforcing, checking in. The team are really great at doing constant follow-up with our most vulnerable students, who we've tagged as at most risk.
Can I just contribute to what Helen just said? I mean, I think something that I have found to be particularly important in this two-way conversation is the language that you choose to use when you write to students, right? I think most of what programs fear when they're doing a lot of online support is sounding too robotic in how they respond. And so I think a thing to do is when you're dealing with, let's say, a particular group of students who are specifically vulnerable, and you can see in their surveys exactly what they've said the issue is, right? So then you don't just say, "Hi, dear Sikalela Scholar, we are checking in on you." We're saying, "We're checking in on you because we've seen in your survey that this and this is happening," right? So I think once you include that particular information of what the student has said about themselves, immediately it makes them feel like somebody sees me on the other side, right? Or if you have a group of students that are not responding at all, if you change the subject line to say, "Katlego, you have not responded, what's going on," right? So Katlego. So immediately when a student sees an email in the midst of like a sea of other emails from the university, that one question mark of, "Hey Katlego, is everything okay?" that immediately gives a sense that there's somebody on the other side. And even though it's being done at a large scale, it's still about them to an extent. And I think then that allows you to be able to support the student effectively because of how you choose to use your words in that two-way conversation.
The personal touch, very much important, like you said, and it makes the student feel comfortable to engage with the program. So thank you very much for adding on, Sishe. This pillar also talks to creating a sense of community. Helen, how can you do that virtually?
Yeah, so Sikle touched on our wellness program, which I think was a great example. On Dal Young Leaders as well, we were able to, through Instagram, be able to post pictures of the students, doing their exercise. Like, we gave them a HIIT challenge, and we gave them a healthy eating challenge, and we gave them a recipe, and, all the different versions of that recipe. I didn't know that a boerewors stew could look so different across so many different students. It was really lovely to be able to have the students sort of feel like they were engaging as well, and they were part of the conversation, and leveraging technology to do that. I think another way that we've been able to invest in creating virtual community is bringing our alumni into the conversation. So we've run a few events that are focused onto our alumni mentorship program. The first was with an alum who had been through FESMAS 4, and so had managed to get his degree despite the challenges of that, that stage of FESMAS 4. I think bringing in that alumni experience has been important, and bringing in different voices. And then we've also been running Career Insights series with alumni talking about careers, because obviously, sometimes helping the students to think to the future, and not just in the here and now, can be very powerful for them. And it shows, kind of starts to speak to that fourth pillar, which is their broader circumstances. Like, we don't just care about your academics. We're not only going to talk to you about academics, but we're going to talk to you about wellness. We're going to talk to you about your career. And so we start to, through our actions, show students that we really care about the other stuff.
There's a lot that speaks to the spirit of Ubuntu, which lies at the heart of South Africa when it comes to, us as a people. So very, very interesting what you've just shared, Helen. And it's a great intro into our final pillar that recognizes the non-academic factors that are more important than ever, particularly in the South African context. Sihle, we know the tough environments low-income students have returned to. How have you meaningfully been able to support these students virtually?
Yeah, so I think, when I was thinking about this particular pillar, and I wanted to kind of give the rest of our community an idea of how I think about it. So I almost imagine like students are on the seesaw, right? And I think when online learning kind of happened, it just bounced up and they were in the air, and in a lot of ways they were ungrounded. And I think of what our role is almost trying to get them to a place where they feel safe enough to be able, one, to engage with the demands of this time, but to also be less anxious about what they're capable of being able to do at this time, right? So I think that the reality is there's all these different weights that can keep somebody in the air for much longer than they need to be. And that could be their home environment, that could be balancing home chores, that could be grief during this time with all of the varying kinds of things that are happening. So it's kind of engaging with all of those different levels at which the weights that may be keeping students up in the air for much longer than they need to be. And I think there's something that Helen said a little bit earlier. It's then saying, okay, as a program, what are we able to actually do? And what does the university already provide that we can use to make sure that the student is getting the support that they need so that they are less in the air and they're finding their feet somehow? And I think we understand that there are resources from the university, there are faculty student advisors, there's student counseling, there's SADC, there's Lifeline. And then to say, well, I can't necessarily provide the student with grief management, but the university has the resources to be able to provide the student with the support. So then what do? I then send the student the contact details to say, listen, please contact SADC. A couple of days later, I've already put the student on my watch list. I check if they have, and if they haven't, I CC them in an email to student counseling to say, I'm looking for support for the student. And immediately student counseling sends a calendar to say the student must set an appointment. So you've pushed the student to a place where they can actually access the support that they need. And it's not directly from you, but you have been the referral track or the pathway to them ensuring that they get that particular support. And so I think that's been how we have been working through it, figuring out what is it that we can do, what is it that the university can do, and where the university is able to provide support as best as possible to ensure that we're connecting the students to the relevant resources. If a student is having an issue with around balancing their home environment, for instance, saying, well, everybody else at home thinks I'm acting better when I'm studying, which is some of the experiences that students are having, being in a small environment and everybody says you think you're smarter because you're studying, those are not the kinds of experiences that you expect. But students have faculty student advisors, right? And so if you say, in your faculty, you have these 3 different advisors, here are their telephone contacts. You can either WhatsApp them, you can email them, you can have a Google Chats calendar, you can set up a meeting with them there. Please, would you contact them? And then a week later, you put them on your watch list to say, have you contacted your faculty student advisor? And what we found now that we're calling students during exam time, somebody will say, I'm doing so much better than I thought, right? And you say, well, what helped? It was the conversation I had with my faculty student advisor, because then they were able to take me through and give me a strategy of how I can work through my particular home environment. And so I think that's essentially how we've really been able to support students with non-academic factors, thinking through what it is we can provide and then ensuring that we are utilizing university services effectively so that students get the best support possible during this time.
Thank you so much, Sihle. And I think, all the 4 pillars that we've touched on tie in together, in the sense of, supporting students, but I also see a sense of there being 3 pillars, being the funders, foundations, organizations that support students, which is very much relevant in this forum. Then there's the people who on the ground that actually support the students directly. And then there's the university as well. So those 3 pillars, coming together and working together to actually solve for student problems, are very key, which I believe is a model that we need to take and move forward with. because I mean, we can only build from where we are right now. So thank you very much. We're going to move into our Q&A session. And the first question that I'm going to actually take is from Alice Moyo. And Dr. Khadi, I'm going to ask, send this question to you. The question is UP also monitoring student performance for all students besides the ones who had been identified as at risk? So there were students identified as at risk, but are you tracking data for all students in terms of performance?
Definitely, that's something that we do, because initially before lockdown, all the students were being tracked for their performance. And actually, what is an advantage is that with Blackboard that we're using is that it has built into it a predictive tool. So we're also getting into the area of predictive analysis, where the predictive tool, Blackboard Predict, will flag a student at risk. And if that student is at risk already, this is the data that is made available to the heads of departments and the Deputy Dean Teaching and Learning. They can access the system, and interventions can be put in place to see the students that the system has flagged. So this applies across the board. All the students are monitored for performance, and so that we can give them the necessary support to get them to our tagline, the finish line, on time.
Thank you, Dr. Khadi. Thank you to everyone for all the comments. Yes.
Sorry, Kat, I just wanted to. Yeah, sorry, Kat. I just wanted to add on the monitoring student performance. Yes. On our technology tool as well, that's one of the aspects that we track. So, and it's one of the things that would flag a student at risk. So if they're on for example, N+1 or N+2 track, they're automatically put onto case management. So it's something that I think, the teams themselves could also look to do, or look to leverage university data as that predictive analytics comes out.
Thank you so much, Helen. And as I was saying, thank you for all the comments that you guys have put up. And I've got one question which, Dr. Khadi, Sihle, and Helen, I'd just like you to touch on before we close off. What does the future hold for education? Given everything that has been done and how support has been implemented for students, I think we're obviously going to approach things differently moving forward. What's your perspective on that?
Okay, can I go first, Sihle?
Thank you, Dr. Khadi.
Yeah, for me, I think we are now, being challenged to add the human element. So it's not just the, the data and just, a student is not just a number. We are now forced as universities to consider the context the students are within, and to also tailor-make our support accordingly. So I think that's where the future is taking us, where data analytics, student support is now getting to a large extent that human element, and more multi-stakeholder engagement, where everybody has to come on board, and we leverage on what they bring on the table to put that together to support the student. So I don't see us going into our classrooms, in person anytime soon. So for us, it's just now also, although it's not a good time because of the pandemic that we're facing, but it's also a good opportunity for us to rethink student support, to rethink the measures that we have in place. And I think, for us, in terms of what the future holds, is that we are being pushed to become more innovative in our approaches. So I do see a more innovative higher education landscape, where we are bringing together and we are trying to, see how much we can do to get the students through, and it's becoming exciting for the student, and being more student-centered, But also on the other hand, I've seen that there's also a need to also support the academics, the lecturers as well. Because I think if the lecturers are also being supported, you know, they are also working within a home space. So, you know, the future for us is considering those two, you know, who are both the ones who are facilitating and those who are on the receiving end, who are the students.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dr.
I'll follow your theme of innovation, Dr. Fadi. I mean, I completely agree with everything that you've said. And I think it's that balance of how do you innovate but keep the student at the center of your decision making. So not just innovating for innovation's sake, just like not just using data for data's sake, but actually, you know, it's being able to drive the support to where the students need it most, or being able to tell the story to make sure you can continue funding your programs. I was on a call organized by the South African Graduate Employers Association the other day, and someone said, if you're going to try anything now, try it now. Or if you're going to try anything, try it now, because if you fail, you know, it's a great time to fail and learn and fail fast. So I agree with the innovation points. And, you know, with that, I think it's, you know, how do we create efficiency? You know, we've talked a lot about wraparound support in these types of forums over the last few years. You know, what is really necessary? Where do we need to be spending money? Is it on huge events? You know, I question it. So I think using what we've learned from COVID to be able to say, where do we really need to be able to direct funding and streamline wraparound services, I think we all can take a really good look at our offerings and start to innovate on efficiency. So I think, because that's where we're going to reach scale. And I'm sure we all don't want to be serving 100 or 300 students. We want to be serving entire universities.
Thank you so much.
I mean, yeah.
Any last comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with both Dr. Khadi and Helen that I think it's driving us to an edge for innovation, but I also think it's driving us to a place where we are having to actively engage the different levels of inequalities that students are experiencing. And then we're thinking about how do we make this wraparound support, as we always say in the forum, but like, how do we make it rounded in ways that we're ensuring that students are targeted at every possible area where they could fall through the crack. And so I think that there's just such an incredible experience to be able to think about technology and innovation in ways that really integrate the person, so that our technology isn't just about, it's not just about technology, it's about technology and the person, right? And so I think there's real future and something that we should be looking forward to, because it's at the center of it all is the student and is the person. And I think it's taking us much further than we could have possibly gone with traditional education as we've known it.
Thank you so much to the panel. I hope we've kept everyone warm and you've enjoyed our fireside chat. We will now obviously be closing off this session and, you know, moving into the breakaway sessions. Yeah, Helen, if you could just share the screen. So yeah, moving into the breakaway sessions, I'd just like to ask that you note the 3 points. Number 1 being that you should unmute your mics when you get into the room. And please engage with the colleagues that are there. Share your insights, you know, in terms of what has been put forward. And then secondly, if you do experience some tech problems, please use the ask for help and invite the host into the room, being Julian. So we will assist as and when you do request that support. And then lastly, I'd like to ask that you nominate someone to manage the group itself, because there will be a set time in ensuring that, you know, everything is covered. So yeah, like I said, for the most part, engage, share your insights, and let us engage and talk through everything. And the questions have been put up in the chat sessions, but just to quickly touch base on them again. Number 1 there, how could you leverage the pillars of supporting students virtually to drive forward your program operations and delivery of student support? Then how well do you understand the offerings of the universities and faculties your students attend? could you leverage their services in innovative ways? Question number 3, what areas of support offering could you move to virtual? Where do you see the greatest opportunity for efficiency in the new normal? And then the last question, touching point there, what has been your learning so far in testing virtual support? What has worked, what hasn't worked, and what would you like to try out after today's session? And you can take a screenshot, but you can always refer to the chat box where you will find all the 4 questions for your breakaway sessions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, and just thank you again from the foundation to the partnership on this event with the University of Pretoria and Sihle Kadlejo and Dr. Khadi. And thank you to Russell and the rest of the forum for the opportunity to share our insights. Enjoy your breakaways, and Julian, if you want to do your magic.
Students to take the initiative. And if you look at institutional services by nature, because of the numbers that they're dealing with, they are largely reactive. And so what organizations like ourselves can offer is a more proactive engagement with our students. But I think also reinforcing that, yes, there's many students who really don't access the services that are actually available to them, and we can play a very big role in trying to both educate ourselves about what's on offer, but also to encourage students to take those up. And I think also our group felt that the whole experience of COVID had been very instructive in trying out technologies and more virtual ways of engaging, and that they're likely to continue at least some of those longer term. And just to encourage all the organizations, I know at the Bursary Forum level, we are wanting to send out a questionnaire to every organization to sort of work through, which is really looking at a whole range of program interventions that we adopt with our students, and to say to what extent post-COVID might these continue virtually, or must they be face-to-face, or will it be a mixture of both, and to sort of reflect on why. Thank you.
Could I give feedback from my group?
Yeah, sure, Monique.
Okay, so basically I think, we've all understood, that things like surveying, data collection, and needs analysis, and then follow-up are all very important strategies. And I think we've all learned to become much more efficient at this. And so I think that's going to help us going forward. In terms of the university's offerings, I think we're still struggling to understand what most universities are offering and who to access. And, we do understand that people are in these services are working, very hard, and that they're overstretched. But I think many of our students are struggling to access these services, either because they don't know who to go to, or if they do know, they can't get appointments because of demand. So I think that's an area we need to understand better. We certainly haven't, don't understand it fully and don't have enough information, nor do our students. And then what areas of support could we move to virtual? We certainly are looking at, now that we've done the virtual support, we will certainly look down the line to see, what aspect we can move from physical contact to more virtual contact. But I think the jury's still out on that. We have to see at the end of the year how effective our virtual contact has been. We don't know yet. We think it's going okay, but only the results will tell. And then also, we also need to have a student voice on this. We need to understand from our students what has worked for them. So I don't think we can sit here and say, this is what we're going to be doing going forward. I think we have to look at our results, and we have to look at what our students' experience of our virtual support has been, in addition to our own experience. So I think the jury's still out on that one. And learning so far, I think we've all learned to be much more tech savvy, much more comfortable with technology, and understanding how we can apply it. So again, it's an ongoing journey. We also have to understand that we need to be flexible, because our student audiences are varied. Some can do Zoom and Teams, others can only do WhatsApp, and you know, so we have to learn to be we have to be learned to be sort of flexible and can't just have this one size fits all solution for everyone. But again, we will only know how well the tech has worked once we have further information down the line. Another important point that we thought was important was that we need to reach out to each other. These webinars have been extremely helpful and useful, but you know, we understand, just like our students have found peer-to-peer learning and support very useful, so do we find it very helpful. And I think we can also learn to reach out to each other independent of these sessions. These sessions are really important that we get introduced to each other, but I think that doesn't stop us from reaching out to each other independently if we need to do so or would like to do so. Anyway, my notes are a bit more expansive. Who do I send the notes to?
I don't know if are we sharing them out, Russell? I'm not sure if that's been done on the previous events. I didn't see anything come through, but I'm happy if they come through to me. I'm not sure what we're doing with them.
I think we have, Helen, although we probably haven't used them, so it's probably not critical. But I think it'd be nice maybe just for us to reflect on the event to receive some of that. So yes, if possible, that would be great.
Great. So maybe what we can do is, if you have particular notes, maybe you could share them with someone who sits on the Bursary Forum team who meet once a week. So for example, if you're career-wise, send over your notes to Monique, and then we'll bring those together and discuss, and then we'll create an email to summarize.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the insights, Monique. I think, you know, your point around the student voice really stood out to me. And, you know, as we're going through this, I think getting that feedback, you know, we're hearing from students, you know, online events are great, but we miss the food and so, you know, and they miss the camaraderie and the gear. And, you know, I think it's all of the things that go with feeling part of the program. So, you know, like one of the things we're also playing around with is the idea of like an event in a box. You know, how do you send an event through to a student and help them have an experience? So yeah, but I agree, it really does need to, you need to keep that student voice and bring them into your decision making. Absolutely. Anybody else who is keen to share what their group's thoughts were? We've got time for one more. Okay, if you do have anything from your group, if you just take yourself off mute and you can just, we'll treat this like popcorn. I'm not sure if the raise your hand thing is working. Cool. I'll finish up, Sihle, maybe from your group, if you want to give us a little bit of a summary of any takeaways, maybe one takeaway from your group, and then if you'd like to close out our session for this morning.
I'm happy to do that, Helen. I mean, I think what was really interesting from our group was the variations in the experiences. So for instance, with REAP sharing their experiences around the majority of their students coming from rural areas, and what does virtual support look like when you are in that particular circumstance. I think like thinking through those different levels of like structural assistance was a really big part, and I think is part of what could be the ongoing conversation, because student support looks different for us supporting universities in the Western Cape versus supporting students in the Eastern Cape or UWC, right? Like, so I think those variations in the structure were quite a key part of our conversation. And then I think some of the issues that most programs are grappling with is part of what student support in terms of face-to-face looked like was that you were allowing students to escape from their home environments. And so coming in on a Saturday was a key part of them leaving, right? And so what does it look like to then go into the online? And I think part of my own encouragement and my thinking to the group was that most of the time we think of online learning as this complete removal from actual support. But then what I've since realized is that once you make the support systematic in such a way that the students feel like they can rely on it, then there is something that is still very holistic about that. And I think not thinking about online as just being completely robotic, but also really as a part of a holistic support model that we should be eager to explore, right? And keen to see, and kind of getting to that place where it isn't technology, but it is a support model that we are using, and it's a vehicle to really ensure that we are both efficient and effective in this new normal.
Thanks, Sihle. Let me get you the next slide. So Sihle, I think there's just a few final next steps that the team, that everyone can take. Yeah, I think everybody, we would love your feedback. You have an email that will be landing in your inbox at 11:30, so in a minute's time. So please do check your junk folder and look out for that email. With that, it will be shared from SurveyMonkey, please do reach out to us and the forum if you don't receive that, and we can make sure you do, but everybody who registered is on that email invite list. There is also a link to that survey there, and then please do sign up for our next event. In a 3 weeks time, I believe, the Students for a Better Future, Old Mutual Education Trust and the Tomorrow Trust will be hosting our 3rd webinar in this series, which will be talking all things student wellness. So we look forward to seeing you there. It is exactly 11:30, so I can get you to your next meeting or just to your next cup of coffee. So thank